Following the death of a marshal in Lander County, the second to be removed from his post in the span of 2 years, federal authorities rushed out yet another replacement to the beleaguered portion of Nevada. Little was known of Marshal Calamity Smith's life before the marshal's arrival in Lander County. Hints of a territorial dispute back in California were ruminated by many a tongue, but Smith never said a word of it to anyone. Continue with the summary. The shooting of a respected cowboy by the marshal before reaching town put a somber tone to the Tin Star's arrival. The day that the marshal arrived in Preston Springs was the same day that a local gunslinger named Tumbleweed Jack came calling. Jack earned himself a cell in Carson City after a brief stint in the Elko jail, and because of this, the inhabitants of Lander County considered that justice had returned. The marshal would soon ride out to visit the Red Ribbon Mining Company, but nothing could stop the destruction of a makeshift dam that the prospectors had assembled. This sabotage would later be officially attributed to a roving band of Shoshone Indians, despite the fact that the owning couple, Anya and Randall Edmondson, swore that Calamity Smith had been directly involved. The authorities in Carson City utterly refused to investigate the matter further. The marshal would be tested again while attempting to escort a wagon loaded with gold to the Utah border. Sadly, Marshal Smith returned without the wagon and nary a scratch. Later stories by the Hartigan gang suggested that they not only stole the bags of gold, but that the whole theft might have been arranged. Oh, was it now? Eventually, a man called Steele came calling to Preston Springs. He claimed to be the proper marshal for Lander County and had all the paperwork in order. Marshal Smith took Steele's arrival as a personal affront and set out to investigate. Witnesses were spoken with and evidence gathered. Soon the two marshals met amid the busy Babylon saloon. The jury were the citizens, and they found Steele guilty of impersonation. The false marshal would eventually be taken to Carson City to await a more formal trial. Autumn settled into Nevada and brought with it a very different threat, and not one from the Six Horns Lodges, not after Marshal Smith saw the nomadic Indians off to their wintering grounds in Green Deer Valley. The town of Preston Springs was facing a grave challenge as a flood seemed imminent. An immense effort saved the majority of the town from the raging waters, and life soon returned to normal. Winter began to close in, but in those waning days there came reports of Indian raiders striking near Albion Falls. Marshal Smith set out to confront these along with a band of settlers from the Church of Latter-day Saints, but ran afoul of a band of Paiute Indians. A parley was entered into, and the marshal managed to quell the anger of the Paiute's war chief, a man called Many Falling Rocks, despite the loss and butchery of his son. While searching for the raiders, Marshal Smith and a posse came across a regiment of U.S. cavalry on an Indian sweep. A long talk with Captain Baker ended with the regiment riding off without a single Indian to show for it. Marshal Smith moved on in pursuit of the real raiders and dispersed the outlaws at the Painted Caves. This included the death of their leader, a Bannock Indian called Hungry Snake, amidst the twisting passages. Marshal Calamity Smith then returned to Preston Springs to wait out the winter. The spring of 1868 opened with the word of an impending attack on the Central Pacific Railroad. Marshal Smith was quick to ride out to the endangered railhead. Indeed, it was fortuitous that the marshal did so, for a small army of ruffians had gathered under the lee of old artillery to break the railhead and loot all that lay inside. A band of saints from Albion Falls rode on down to participate in the defense and asked no reward for doing so. The local sheriff, a man named Preston, would receive a special deputation in order to administer a bit of frontier justice beyond the confines of Preston Springs. Friendly Indians of the Shoshone tribe arrived in time to ply their well-honed skins to help thwart the attack. An outlaw gang turned their backs on the easy pickings in mid-battle at the marshal's behest and caused a great deal of chaos before they were forced to depart. Paiute Indians from Oregon helped fight off the bandits as a favor to the marshal. Indians of the Six Horns Lodges, fresh out of wintering in Green Deer Valley, fired their rifles in defense of the railhead and asked for nothing more than a few trophy scalps. A U.S. cavalry under the command of Captain Baker rode to the rescue near the end of the attack and helped put the miscreants to flight. In the end, the railroad's casualties were light thanks to, in large part to the marshal's keen mind and a horde of allies. As the smoke cleared, Marshal Smith knew that the remaining enemies would make a desperate lunge for Preston Springs, and there the marshal met them and defeated them only by the hardest of battles. Calamity Smith rode for New York following events in Lander County and traveled partway along the nascent Transcontinental Railroad. The death of the elderly Frederick Charles Upton after a suspected confrontation between the two gave rise to many scandalous rumors in the years to come. Thus ended the saga of Lander County, but other stories continued. Yeah, we'll see all of the epilogues. So far we haven't heard a single word about Miss Carroway. Let's see. Epilogue for Marshall Smith. Calamity Smith, known for carrying both a Smith and a Wesson and a dueling sword, headed out to New York. The death of Frederick Charles Upton, the reputed mastermind of Lander County's troubles, resulted from their encounter. No charges of any kind were ever filed. Yeah, who would? Known for being a marshal who sought to civilization to that part of the frontier, Calamity Smith stayed on the frontier as a marshal alone. Soon enough, the marshal's true name was cleared, and they were able to reacquire a particular parcel of land as their own. Sure, the fate of Miss Carroway. Miss Carroway Hartigan died, defending Preston Springs from a band of bandits but the year before she might well have joined. The townsfolk were more than a little confused by that turnaround, but even so they took her sacrifice to heart and named more than a few of their children after her. The fate of Dan Schmidt. Dan Schmidt met Marshal Smith, and the two eventually became ready friends. He became the deputy marshal for Lander County for a time, despite his tendency to wander a bit farther than those borders. Indeed, he considered wearing the tin star to be a weighty burden, but he had given his word, so he abided by it until the term of service was complete. Dan Schmidt wandered and left behind plenty of places in the search for one more agreeable than the last. He hunted high and low, then eventually settled for some place close enough to what he wanted. There he rested his boots and called it home. The fate of Ben Carson. No, I have no idea who that is. Ben Carson was slain by Marshal Smith at the watering hole just a day's ride from Preston Springs. Oh, yeah. Dan Schmidt would later tell everyone what had happened, and Carson's wife would devote the child in her womb, Wren Carson, to be the eventual instrument of her vengeance. Fate of Maria Agostino. Maria Agostina Teresa Maria de Zapopan, Maria de la Descalzas Reales, Maria Paulina de Toledo y Santa Rosa, would continue her widowed life and platonic relationship with Marshal Smith until it was finally safe enough for her to return to Mexico. She lived a fulfilling life, rarely swerving from doing what justice required. In time, she would impart this virtue to the people of Jalisco as that same province emerged from the Mexican Revolution. The fate of James Tiberius Preston. I had completely forgotten that the T in James Preston's name stood for Tiberius. James Tiberius Preston stayed in his town for many years. He never lost the urge to make money however he could and spend it lavishly, though he secretly funded numerous libraries. And when he arranged for a gaggle of children to further their education in those halls, he was always certain to be well away. But eventually people noticed his good intentions and commented privately upon them. Yiska formed a powerful friendship with Marshal Smith. When times turned rough for the Shoshone, he looked to the Marshal as a weather vane for what would come next. Yiska continued to approach the federal government on the basis of ethical obligation, seeking to have them treat the Shoshone as equals. It would take years, but in the end he convinced them to carve out a reservation favorable to the Shoshone. Sure, a history of the Transcontinental Railroad. Let's go up there. Actually, let's do Marshal Simon James and the Undertaker first, to finish off all the characters. With the acknowledged death of the elder Upton, the man who had ordered his brother's assassination, Marshal Simon James returned to California with his wife Julie Moore. There they settled down and were happy to live and love in full. Alright, a history of the Transcontinental Railroad. The Central Pacific Railroad fought off an attack in the summer of 1868 when a determined regiment of bandits in possession of a number of outdated but still serviceable artillery pieces advanced upon the railhead in force. Scarcely a man was killed thanks to stalwart defense. Work resumed quickly thereafter. Undeterred, the railroad kept its frantic pace and reached Promontory Summit in Utah, where it met with the Union Pacific Railroad. There the two railroads drove in a golden spike to bring the country together. Where before there had been two halves separated by impossible distances, now there was a road of iron forged between them. Though the Union Pacific would shortly file for bankruptcy owing to events in New York, enough governmental support was given to keep the railroad running. The Central Pacific basked for a time in its completed work, recapitalized, and then began laying rail elsewhere to connect small towns and mining sites that swiftly grew larger and larger. The fate of Preston Springs. In the wake of the Transcontinental Railroad, Preston Springs briefly became a boomtown where the silver flowed as freely as the liquor. Fashions from New York were sold in Matthew's store, Kevin's Forge glowed throughout the day, and the Grand Haven Hotel glowed bright at night. Mother Maddie tended the mother lode until her heart finally gave out, and the townsfolk buried her in the shade of an oak tree atop Boot Hill. Miss McMurphy kept tending to the Grand Haven Hotel for J.T. Preston. In time, the two of them would marry, and despite the yelling they often got into, rare was the day that Eva slept alone. In time, the hotel would become the grandest haven in Nevada. But the boom times ended once the gold slowed to a trickle, and one by one the stores closed up and people moved on. Only J.T. Preston's iron will kept the town together, but it took a savage toll on him. Then one day he too had to give up. Preston Springs became a ghost town the next year. Just one of many such places in Nevada where tumbleweeds walked down streets and old buildings groaned with every breath of wind. So what happened to Weston? Did that get mentioned at the beginning? I can't remember. Well, the fate of the Indian tribes. Yiska was glad to have come to a tacit agreement with Marshal Smith concerning his people. Yiska worked hard and sometimes reluctantly called upon Calamity Smith over the years to lessen the difficulties of the Shoshone. But the federal government would soon force the Indians onto a reservation, and though their hardships were alleviated by outside charities, a few steel knives, bundles of blankets, and bags of seeds were but a small recompense for the loss of their nomadic way of life. The fate of Lander County. Lander County sprawled too much to be effectively governed and would gradually be reduced in size and scope. But even so, it left its mark on every village, town, and trading post that sprung up in the wake of the Transcontinental Railroad. And in the decades to come, when people asked what the Wild West was like, the people of the county would say that it was filled with ordinary people working a troublesome land until they made it civilized. Minor characters and locations. Oh, Jesus, that's a lot. We'll look at some of the more interesting ones. Richard Hartigan. Richard Hartigan was never caught. Some said it was because of a pact he'd sworn with Marshal Smith. Others said that the county marshal was secretly a member of the Hartigan gang. For years he wandered and committed all manner of banditry, seeking the one who had taken his daughter from him. For years he sparred with a local marshal, and dozens died in the crossfire. It took a full regiment of U.S. cavalry to bring the man to justice. It said he was never caught, and then it said he brought him to justice. Yeah, we definitely want to know about Wong Dai Choi. Wong Dai Choi continued to help feed the rail layers of the Central Pacific Railroad until the track entered Utah. He returned to California with his hard-earned wealth and set up his own import company. It flourished and provided a crossroads of exotic Eastern cuisine with the more hearty America fare. In time, he would pass the reins of the corporation to his sons and retire to live in a respectable San Francisco home. There he would tend to his family as their wise patriarch. His sons and daughters and their children and their children's children would live and love in California for generations to come. What happened to Martin Baldwin? Martin Baldwin lived and wrote in Elko for years. His dime novels continued to sell, though he was not able to keep any of the profits from the sales. He soon moved back to California owing to the difficulties of the job and undertook a compilation work that sold many copies owing to that association. His dime novel, The Golden Stagecoach, became a dramatic standard for Western books and later movies. Martin would garner local fame by speaking at public engagements and private parties, though his editor would continually prod him for stories with a wider appeal. The proceeds proved to be enough for him to live on, and he did just that, settling into the habit of waking up and immediately putting pen to paper. Mousy, that's important still. Mousy was an ordinary mouse until the day that Marshal Smith decided to take the little critter under proper care. With a fat little belly, the tiny animal, once considered a nuisance, became an erstwhile companion. At first, Mousy stayed chiefly in the office, but later would be seen all around town. It was a hard life on the frontier, hot in summer, cold in winter, and there were always cats or coyotes around, but Mousy endured and had plenty of descendants. Nice job, Mousy. The enduring events of Marshal Smith's life. Thanks to Dan Schmidt, the killing of Ben Carson out of Big Bell Ranch becomes an often embellished tale about the dangers of strangers out. Oh, that's the legend points. We've read through them like literally last episode or something, or 2 episodes ago. So we'll skip through them here. Word of the Marshal's numerous deeds was spread across the frontier and even forded the Mississippi. The name Calamity Smith soon resonated with the aura of virtue. Scholarship on the subject grew until a sizable number of novels, most in hardcover, are written to include the one-time Tin Star of Lander County, even if in only passing reference amid a larger tale of improbable adventures. The Tin Star song. No, I'm not going to be singing a song. Yeah, I think this is it. Credits it is. There are many people to thank for making this game possible, as it appears. I won't read through them, but I'll quickly show all of them. There we go, back to the epilogue. Okay, end this saga. One story's over, but others have just begun. We hope you've enjoyed playing Tin Star. On a scale from 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend this game to a friend? I don't really have any friends who would be into playing the game. If it wants me to to rate the game as a whole, I would give it a 7. I'd say that's a fair rating. The thing is, with Tin Star, it's hard to call it either a positive or a negative. But what was notable was that it played much more like a game compared to the Choose Your Own Adventure novels that I've played before in Choice of Robots and Sabres of Infinity, which played much more like books, where you can occasionally, make decisions and take different paths. This played much more like a game, as in, you've got your free time, and in your free time you've got a certain set of actions which you can do repeatedly and to gain certain stats. And then you could go through town and choose to go to certain buildings and make your purchases, so to speak. And then you have your compatriots who you can choose to take with you on missions and all the stuff like that, which is, as I said before, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just different. So it's hard for me to compare it to the other novels we've played before. It is, I do really like the aspect that we've got here, that you can not necessarily even replay, but just go to a bit of an earlier checkpoint, like it happened when we pretty much died to Hungry Snake back in the cave, where you can just say, okay, well, turn back the time a bit and let me try that again. And I think the thing is, with other novels, like for example, As It Was, even repeating myself, with Choice of Robots and Sabres of Infinity, it makes sense in those scenarios to not have the option to do that. But especially because this novel is rather gamified, I think it works better to be able to do that. And so it got us to a satisfying ending. With the only problem being Miss Carraway died. But yeah, the thing is, I know you'd say, well, obviously you'd realize that, she ran out of bullets in the previous engagement, so why would you call on her again? But my thinking was, I don't know how much time passed between that and then. And I also thought that, if she's out of bullets, she'd either reload or realize and then not do anything. Like, okay, I'm going to at least put part of the blame on her. It's not just my fault that she died. Anyway, I think a 7 is a fine rating. I liked it overall. Yeah. Releases new games on basis. No, thanks. I can keep up with that on my own. I don't need to be notified. Thanks for playing. Yes. Okay. Well, that is the end of Tin Star then. I've got quite a few more Choose Your Own Adventure type games that I've got in my Steam wishlist, at least. I don't think I've bought any of them yet. It'll probably be a while before the next one. I don't quite remember how much of a break there was between Sabres of Infinity and Tin Star. Probably a few months. And it'll probably be the same again. The thing is, I've got like a list of about 30 games I'd like to play through on the channel. You've also got new games coming out. Like, for example, we just got a couple weeks ago, not even weeks ago, like 1 week ago or something, we got a release date for Tales of Arise, which I'm definitely going to be playing on the channel, which comes out in like 3 months. So I need a slot in the week reserved for that, which only leaves me with one other slot. And, you know, I'll fit some others in there eventually. But just so you're aware, it might take a few months before we see one again. Either way, I hope you enjoyed playing through Tin Star with me and watching my progress and the progress of Marshall Calamity Smith. Thanks for watching it. I hope to see you guys next time. Bye.